Now to a story here at home that's getting national attention. Ballot boxes in Vancouver and Portland set on fire early this morning. Investigators believe the cases are connected. Hundreds of ballots in Vancouver were damaged or destroyed, but here in Portland only 3 ballots were affected, and officials were able to identify those voters. Now, why the vastly different outcomes, you wonder? We did too. We looked into it. Turns out there's a fire suppressant canister inside these drop boxes. The one in Portland worked, the one in Vancouver did not. Investigators not sure why it failed and say it was installed earlier this year. Here's a look at surveillance photos of the person that police believe is responsible, driving a dark-colored Volvo. They say the person used an incendiary device to pierce through the box and start a fire inside. That technique was used in both instances this morning, as well as a third time earlier this month at a different drop box in Vancouver.
You know, it's heartbreaking. It is a direct attack on democracy. Yeah, shouldn't happen. It's interfering with people's vote is un-American.
Why anyone would destroy someone's votes, their voices, is beyond me.
The damaged ballot boxes have now been replaced. There will be increased police patrols in all 22 drop box locations in Clark County moving forward, and elections workers will now be ballot box observers 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In the last few years, working elections has become surprisingly a perilous job. So much so that 2 years ago, Oregon lawmakers passed a new law requiring harsher penalties for violence against election workers. And last year, Oregon Secretary of State Lavon Griffin-Valade told state lawmakers that county clerks were leaving the job in droves.
Over the last few years, almost 34% of Oregon's county clerks have retired and left their jobs, which is 12 experienced clerks gone. This is a huge loss of experience and knowledge. When we ask why they're leaving, many cite the same things: threats, abuse, and harassment, largely stemming from the false belief that the 2020 election was stolen.
Secretary of State's office told us last week that they're facing issues this election season as well. One incident came amid backlash over former President Trump not being included in the Oregon voters pamphlet. We've gone over this before, but to remind you, the Trump campaign chose not to appear in the voters pamphlet. It was their choice, not some kind of a state-sponsored election interference. Trump does appear on the ballot in Oregon, though, so you can still vote for him if you want. But that did not stop online conspiracy theorists from running with it and calling the Secretary of State to tell her how they feel. Here's part of a voicemail that someone left. You'll see why we're not letting it all play out.
I hope she fucking burns in hell. And I hope she gets publicly hung for treason. I hope she dies publicly. By the people, for the people, for taking Trump and Vance off the ballot.
Again, that's false. That did not happen. Trump and Vance are on the ballot in Oregon. But you get the picture. The Secretary of State's office tells us that they've had a high volume of calls, social media posts, and emails harassing election workers this year, including some that threaten violence. And just like last year, they say the threats are coming from people who falsely believe the 2020 election was stolen from Donald Trump. Independent research has some insight into that belief. A Pew Research poll released over the weekend shows that Trump voters are far more skeptical of elections than Harris supporters. The poll included more than 4,000 people nationwide between September and October. About 90% of Kamala Harris supporters believe the election will be run well, but only 57% of Trump supporters agree. Pew broke it down even further to dig into exactly what people are thinking when asked, will elections be run well? 93% of Harris supporters think in-person ballots will be counted as voters intended, compared to 77% of Trump voters. And as for mail-in ballots, oh boy, the gap does get much wider. 85% of Harris supporters think it's going to be fine, but only 38% of Trump supporters feel that way. In Clackamas County last week, an organized group showed up to the Board of Commissioners meeting claiming that Oregon's election system has widespread problems that led to big inaccuracies in the 2022 election. The group is called United Sovereign Americans, and at least 12 of them showed up to Thursday's board meeting. They took turns reading prepared documents that claimed a citizen's audit showed errors in the 2022 election.
An open source audit of the Oregon 2022 general election conducted by Oregon State citizens has uncovered evidence of massive inaccuracies that violate both federal and state laws, including 97,552 ineligible or uncertain registration violations found within the Oregon State voter roll database. 71,589 votes cast by ineligible or uncertain registrants. 20,104 more votes counted than voters who voted in the 22 general election. No one knows who cast them.
They went on to tell stories about getting someone else's election mail or ballots for people who had moved out of state. Now, the Oregon Secretary of State's office says the group's claims are not credible and that citizens' audits are based on static data that conflates out-of-date information with inaccuracies. They told us Oregon conducts a robust program to remove voters who are ineligible from the list of active voters. This includes a robust system of data sharing with other states. These updates are performed continuously throughout the year. This process ensures that when ballots are mailed, they go to a complete and accurate list. After hearing the testimony from the group last week, some on the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners seemed somewhat open to their concerns. Chair Tootie Smith, who's up for re-election, says she wants to fact-check the claims, but she believes, there could be problems.
For about every example that you brought forward, I have either experienced that in my personal life or with friends I know.
And Commissioner Mark Scholl said he wants to address it immediately by taking up a resolution. The group proposed calling for a legally valid election and an outside audit of Oregon's voter rolls.
It needs to be done before 5 November, not just for the Clackamas County, but for Clackamas County to send a signal to the entire state. Wake up, take action, listen to the people from...
Commissioner Ben West seconded the idea so the board could start talking about it soon, but they're on recess until November 7th, so Commissioner Scholl's not going to get his way before the election. And it's a resolution, not an ordinance. That means it's not necessarily strongly enforced. Commissioners did warn the group to stay peaceful, though, and not to cause harm to election workers. Instead, they encouraged them to volunteer to be part of the election process.